Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. We are in the final stages of Scare-A-Thon 2023. If you've been following along all month, that's great. If this is your first time watching a Scare-A-Thon video, that's great as well. But we are benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project, and the link to donate is below in the description for this video. So please make a contribution. It's a cause that's very important to myself and my guests. And tonight we are going to be talking about A Wounded Fawn from 2022, directed by Travis Stevens. And here to chat with me about that is my amazing panel consisting of Ashley Lamers and Nicole Mikuzis. And again, we are talking about A Wounded Fawn from 2022. I knew Travis Stevens as a producer primarily. That was how I was introduced to him. He produced some really great stuff, like in the early 2010s, things like Starry Eyes, Cheap Thrills, Big Ass Spider, We Are Still Here, Aggression Scale, XX, the anthology directed by the female directors. But then he started directing, and I think Girl on the Third Floor, was that his first film?
I think so.
Yeah. And then he did Jacob's Wife. I think that was either last year or the year before. So this is, I think, if it's not his third feature, it's certainly the third feature that I've watched. And I was like, okay, I'm down. When I saw his name come up, I'm like, I'm excited because he does a lot of like low budget but well polished indie features, and I was excited to see what came out of this one. Nicole, I think you worked on Girl on the Third Floor, right? So you worked with Travis?
Yeah, and I've known Travis for a long time. When I started in the industry, I was with MPI Dark Sky, and they produced We Are Still Here. So also Starry Eyes.
Yep.
So I've worked with him when he was a producer on a handful of movies, and always had respect for him. And then Girl on the Third Floor was actually filmed in south of Chicago. So it was filmed around here. Travis lives in Los Angeles, and he owns Snowfort Pictures too.
Right. Yep.
So it was filmed here. It's an MPI production. So I wasn't working for MPI at the time, but I also have a cosmetology license. So I went and worked on set and helped with hair and makeup. So
yeah, I met Travis on the film festival circuit. And again, he was just super cool guy. I think Big Ass Spider and Cheap Thrills were playing at South by Southwest that year. And so I got to meet him. And again, just super cool dude.
He's very cool. Yeah. And he was, very cool to work with, and also just very cool to hang out with too. He's, a ton of fun at the festivals, and a handful of times when I fly out to LA for work, I'll meet up with him and stuff too. So yeah. I was excited.
Ashley, had you seen this movie before October? Like it was just one that you kind of blind bought thanks to me proposing it?
Yep.
How'd it go down for you?
I liked how different it was, because it really doesn't look like or feel like anything else that I watched this season. It's definitely something that I could recognize was not going to be for everybody. But there was a lot of it that I found really entertaining and fun and charming. So
let me back up just a second. What drew you to this film? Like you're like, okay, I've got an array of films to choose from. I'm going to pick A Wounded Fawn. What was it about that that drew you to it?
I like the title in and of itself. Yeah, it's a great title. And then I think of the titles that stood out to me when you sent the list, I went and checked out some trailers, and I don't remember the trailer for this, but something about it must have stood out to me for me to go, okay, I'll try that one. I think I would like it. Yeah, there's something about it stood out.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool visuals for sure in this one. And I absolutely agree. The title is different. The title doesn't even sound like a horror film. It sounds like something else, perhaps. And I think you're right that this film is something else. It's not a traditional horror film, even though it kind of starts off like one. And I like the fact that it is broken into a clear Act 1 and Act 2. And Act 2 is a very different movie. And it's kind of, you kind of get two films for the price of one. And I texted both of you today because I was watching it beforehand, and I was like, I don't know. it does turn into a different movie. And I will say I like the second movie more than the first act, although I don't dislike the first act. What I had questions with the first act was that I feel like the screenplay is a little kind of on the nose. And as we're speaking to a female experience, it felt very much like a screenplay written by two guys. And I'm like, I mean, and I was looking forward to asking both of you. I'm like, is that how women talk? Like, are women like hanging out in museums, like talking about, well, you got to tell me how big his dick is when, after you guys have sex? I'm like, all right, cool.
I'm going to say yes.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah. That I mean, maybe not the museum, but that pretty much is how my friends and I talk.
And like, are you like going, my vibrator, like the batteries ran out, blah, blah. Like, is that all just,
yep.
Dang, who knew?
We knew.
Well, you knew clearly. I did not know. I'm like going, this sounds like some bullshit. Well, okay. I stand corrected, Travis. I apologize. You women are filthy. The film starts off at an auction where a statue of the Erinys, and the Erinys are three sisters, three kind of like furies or witches or fates who are closing in on a person who is down, kind of protecting themselves from their fury. And that piece is being auctioned off. And our character of Kate wins the auction over the character of Bruce. And Bruce shows up at her door and makes a counter offer after the fact. And that's where the first part of the film is going. And then we later meet Meredith, who is somebody who owns, or she works at the museum. I forget what her position is.
Maybe a curator?
It could be, yeah, could be a curator. But she and Bruce are starting up a relationship, and she's going to be running off to a cabin in the woods with him for a romantic getaway. And, that is the aforementioned, the girls want to know all the goods about how that encounter goes. Again, she's coming out of an abusive relationship, or at least a toxic relationship. And because we hear that through a therapy session. And there were things where, like, as she's driving along and she says, hey, would you mind if we stop off and get some snacks? Because I really need to go to the bathroom. And he's like, do you mind holding it for a little bit? We're almost there. And I'm like, okay, right there. Red flags, red flags, red flags.
Right. Well, and then it even visually showed a bunch of red bunting, like flapping in the breeze. So
Yep.
Yeah. And then, so that piece of, can you hold it? We're almost there. It's daylight. And then it is absolute nighttime when they get to the cabin.
Right. Which I was kind of like, but then she doesn't like just dash into the cabin and like immediately find the restroom. Like there's that ticking clock. I'm just like going, she had to go like an hour and a half ago. Like what's happening? So this is where I get my phone out. I'm like, do you guys like this? Are you okay with this?
I like too the and it was a theme that kept coming back. I mean, obviously with the Furies, that it was the sculpture, but when they're in the art gallery, she's looking at a Bouguereau painting of the Furies. Of course, then Act 2 comes up, like the Furies are in the story. I thought those little pieces were pretty rad. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty much in from the beginning. I just didn't know where it was going to go. If it was going to be just a regular serial killer movie with like a little vengeance twist, it became something way different in the second act.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it surprised me because we have these, and I feel like these must be intentional because Travis knows his genre, that we have these cliches like the cabin in the woods, like the stuff passing in front of the lens with a jump scare sound, all of these things that I was like going, this feels like you're playing me like I've never seen a horror movie before. And I feel like it was to kind of lull us into a place of convention so that he could flip it and make it very unconventional in the second half. Right down to the fact of we have hey, I'll throw the spoilers up. Our main character gets killed, like 40 or, 35, 40 minutes in. And then, whoop, she's not dead. or is she? And then we go into act 2. Okay, now I don't know what's happening. And that was where I texted. I was like, okay, things got better. All right, we can have a conversation tonight. It'll be fine. Nicole, I mean, you also saw Jacob's Wife.
I did. And I actually, what stands out to me more, and because I've seen it a handful of times, is the girl on the third floor. I felt like had a lot of similarities as a wounded fawn, just in general, of like the male lead character giving into his desires. I mean, they were different desires in the 2 movies, but it's sort of the male giving into these things he's not supposed to be doing, and then ultimately the women sort of teaming up together at the end, and that happened in both films. And also, like you were just saying too, there's little pieces that he kind of inserts here and there, and they're not these big huge things, they're just kind of small things that you have to look for, and he also did that quite a lot in Girl on the Third Floor, with just like a marble rolling on the floor, just those small things that you're like, oh yeah, this feels like horror. This is, as a whole, his movies aren't the goriest and the scariest, but he inserts these little pieces of traditional horror, and I can appreciate that.
Jacob's Wife has a female character who starts turning into a monster. And we kind of have something similar happening here as well, where we have who was once, the victim, what we would label as a victim, like completely turning the tables. And these 3 women who have been murdered by this guy, Bruce, like they are visiting vengeance upon him. And I was excited by that, and then it turns into kind of like a Greek drama, like literally with heightened language and with a very theatrical quality to it. It doesn't feel realistic at all anymore. And I thought that was a really bold choice on his part. I'm curious how it goes down with your quote unquote traditional horror fan, because I feel like there's some big ideas on display, and I don't know that everybody is going to be keyed into that. I mean, the fact, like, I felt like I wanted to be like, okay, I need to go find out what Greek plays he's referencing, if he's referencing a Greek play or not.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know the answer. I do love Greek mythology, and that's kind of what reeled me into this movie too, besides the fact that it was Travis Stevens. But it did make me kind of dig further into Greek mythology afterwards too, because I didn't realize the extent of Medusa's background and things like that. So it was pretty interesting. It kind of led me on my own path of researching more. But speaking of that, I absolutely love the end scene, and like almost never wanted it to end because it just kept going. And I was like, how long is
like the running credits?
Yeah, and him, well, the spoilers up.
So got the spoilers up, so
the slashing, and it just, and him tossing and turning, and it was like he was never.
I called it the Pearl moment, which
it was. Yeah.
I'm like, it's the moment of this discomfort that holds and holds and holds, and because as audiences we have an expectation of what, like, eventually this is going to fade out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
I had mixed feelings about that end. I loved that she was there and witnessing just silently, and she takes no action, just is watching this happen. I loved that, like, it was realistic to me that he wouldn't acknowledge or admit he did anything.
Right. He
would only say it was like this part of him or this thing that took over, but it's not really me. Right. And I thought that was great, with abusers rarely really accepting the harm that they've caused. Then what I didn't like about it was that it was realistic, that there's no real justice. Like, I mean, there's a justice that's enacted, like you did something wrong, so you're going to suffer. There's no accountability. And that just feels like, I suppose it's very realistic. Like, you're never going to feel that sense, maybe not never, but certainly in this case, just don't feel that sense of, all right, this has come full circle, and and it's done.
Well, something that just occurred to me now, as we're having this conversation, is that there is that Greek mythology quality of this happens for eternity. You know, you have the guy whose liver's he's chained to the rock in Prometheus, I think, where he's getting, you know, his liver eaten. And then overnight, his liver grows back so that the bird can come back and feast on him again. And this is going to go on for eternity. You know, Sisyphus, who's rolling the hill, the rock up the hill, and then it's going to roll back down for eternity. And I think that message, like I say, it just landed with me that that's what's going on in that end scene, is that this is his fate, is that he will be doing this for the rest of his life, or not life so much as just, you know, his rest of his existence, and it will be observed. It will be witnessed. And that just kind of landed for me.
Yeah. Thank you. Feels much better now.
I know. I think we can call it a day.
One of the things I just fun little remembering, but like there's that blues song that's like, if I had $1 million, I would keep 999,999, and I'd give you one, because as much as I love you, I love myself as well. I was like, because that song plays twice, and I'm like, wow, okay, so there's a message, you know, being laid out there that I think what you were just talking about, Ashley, like that's a very male experience. Like I cannot cop to the fact that I made the choice to do this. There's something else within me that made me do that. And it is that selfish quality, not just male, you know, but it's that selfish quality of humans where we have to satisfy our own needs first and foremost, you know, and there is altruism, but there's also a lot of, you know, just making sure that I'm okay first. And that's where a lot of that toxic behavior comes from, is coming from that place of damage and hurt. And he literally has, you know, we learned that he has a tumor of some sort going on in his head that he can blame it on. But I love those moments where, because, you know, during the altercation where she whacks him, like we see a bone chip, and when he touches it, like things like light up on the screen. I was like, that's fun. I haven't seen that before.
I love too as it kept going, it got more and more just cartoonish, I guess. I can't think of a better descriptor right now. But even his eye wound went from like, you know, it was like swollen shut. It looked great. And then as it goes on, like the blood turns orange, like a red orange.
Yeah. Well, there's an artifice to it.
Yeah. I just found that all so fascinating. And I don't know how much of that is like maybe like indicating like a descent into some sort of madness, like he's just delirious in this moment. I don't know, but I found it visually really fascinating and entertaining.
I like that you know, towards the end, especially where you are kind of trying to figure out like what exactly is real here. Like I still don't totally have the answer for that. And I like that, you know, I like a movie that kind of keeps you guessing on what's actually happening, because it could have happened like that, or the last 20 minutes could have all just been delusion.
Yeah. Well, do we think that Meredith actually does, that she's not dead, and that she does strike back?
I hope so, but I don't know. Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure if that was real.
Yeah.
You know, like if like she was dead, and then everything that follows afterwards is a delusion on his part, or if she actually does come back from her attack, strikes him, and maybe that's where the delusion starts, or if this is literally happening. You know, I don't think it could be literally happening, because I don't think, you know, Meredith's like, I'm going to find this mask and wig and throw it on and, you know, carry out this elaborate revenge, you know, scheme. But it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, you got me. I don't know where we're going now, but I'll go with you.
Yeah. I wondered if the visual cues, like, I guess when they show her, like, especially with the end credit scene, where the visual kind of goes back to the first act look, then I was like, okay, so this is real. The other stuff where it was more cartoonish, I was like, okay, this is more delusion.
The theatricality of it, like, I think that's that artifice I was referring to. Like that, yeah, the color is not blood, not the color of blood. We've seen the color of blood. Like when he washes his hands after the first murder, we know what, that Travis Stevens knows what blood looks like. And then it's a deliberate choice not to have it that. And I thought some of the scenes in the forest were just incredible. Like, when the wolf is running and it's got the face on it, I was like, that's cool. There's choices being made. I like the fact when I know that it's somebody who's making deliberate choices and not just that they don't know how to make a movie. He knows how to make a movie. He's making this movie, and it may not be for everybody.
Yeah. I thought too, in terms of choices and subtlety, sometimes subtlety, and even the subtlety sometimes is not subtlety at all. But so there was a shot where he's got his head up against the door and he's like got his hand on the knob.
Shining moment.
Yes. And Bruce wearing a denim shirt that's like soaked in blood, and his name is Bruce, and they're in a cabin in the woods. I'm like, okay, so there's some Evil Dead love happening here too. And then I'm like, so what am I missing? Because I bet there's a whole lot more. Which
yeah, how many Easter eggs is he hidden in there?
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe that's kind of the you should probably watch it again.
Well, and it's funny you say Evil Dead, because I wrote down when the stovepipe monster starts attacking, I was like, that feels so kind of like Evil Dead, where he's boxing with the stovepipe.
Yes.
That was cool. That I feel like that was maybe kind of the moment too where things kind of shifted into total delusion, batshit crazy, fun. But yeah, that was a very cool scene.
I wrote down it was like such a freaking great effect where her skin seared onto the stove there. Yeah, that was a nice little touch. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, and again, we have that character who keeps kind of popping up. When he opens the barrels, and we discover that he's got the three bodies there. Again, I think it's a really smart script. And I said this on a previous episode, there are times like when it goes into that literate quality where it feels written and not natural speaking, not natural vernacular, that I almost wish that they had done something where we were getting subtitles, like if we'd shifted into something where, because this theatrical way of speaking it hits our ear so hard that we're like, hang on, what's going on? And it's jarring. And I think, to your point, Ashley, I think it would go better on a second viewing because it's coming. But because we haven't been prepared for that in any way, like suddenly people are talking out of a Greek tragedy or, almost Shakespearean in verse. And you're just like, nothing sounds natural anymore. But again, that's intentional. It's not intended to be natural speak anymore.
Right.
But it is jarring, to be sure. Cool. Any last thoughts about A Wounded Fawn? Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No, I actually want to watch it a second time now. I feel like I'll get more out of it the second time after talking through with you guys about it.
Like any good literature that you study, I feel like we do get more out of, the Greek stories of like Medea and, the Agamemnon, where you're just kind of like, oh, there's history attached to this. And kind of like this film, I think you can enjoy this film on its own. I think it's a film that you will appreciate the more you go back and dig into it. Like, I feel like like you just said, Ashley, I feel like there's Easter eggs all over the place, both in the literary style and in the references to kind of pop culture. Like, I think there's a lot going on. I like this movie more, having talked about it as well. So I'm excited to go back and check it out as well. Cool. Well, thank you again. Again, this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. The link to donate is below in the description of this video. And once again, we're getting to the end of October, so everybody have a happy and safe Halloween season. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.